Hi friends, I'm Allie. Welcome back or welcome to my channel. Okay, we're going to be talking about some cozy book recommendations. Before I talk about the books though, I just want you to like hear me out. Like, I'm gonna put out a disclaimer, okay? Okay? More like discussing the thesis, if you will, of this video. If you can't tell, I'm Australian. I know, shocker. You are so terribly surprised. So down here in the Southern Hemisphere, we are entering the spring-summer seasons, also known as the season where Australia turns into a literal hellscape. So we are not wearing the cozy jumpers, okay? It's not sweater weather. Right? We are not drinking the pumpkin spice lattes, which I never had, by the way. Are they even nice? I don't know. Anyway, we're just hoping to be able to sit through the day, be able to sit still enough so that we don't overheat and sweat. That's basically what happens in the spring, summer. However, okay, cozy is a mindset. That is the thesis of this video. Cozy is a mindset. It's an energy. It's a vibe. You can be cozy in 45 degrees Celsius weather. You can be cozy in winter, in autumn, in spring, and in summer. It's a mindset. The books I have chosen, therefore, encapsulate cozy to mean, okay, this is like purely subjective. Let's be honest. That is the feeling of cozy. What is that? Let me explain. Thank you so much for asking questions. Okay. So it's that feeling of snuggling with a wonderfully warm blanket with a cup of Earl Grey tea in front of a warm fire or a heater in a thunderstorm. Or on the opposite side for me, what is cozy? It's the sun shining down on your face, but you're wearing sunscreen, an iced beverage in one hand and a book in the other, sitting on a blanket in a park, that scent of freshness, which is that the grass? I don't know, I'm allergic to grass, so but it's that scent of freshness and spring, of like flowers blooming, birds are chirping, you know, that kind of vibe, overwhelming your senses in a really good way though. Okay, in a way that makes you feel like pure joy and contentment. That's the feelings that I'm trying to encapsulate here with my cozy recommendations. So that's what I mean by cozy. So you can be cozy regardless of season, regardless of where you are, regardless of when you watch this video. It's a mindset, babe. If you need to be cozy, then be cozy. I read cozy books as self-care. Really, it's to ground yourself, it's to be present, you know, it's to help with your mental health. Coziness, we need to achieve it. Well, I need to achieve it sometimes, just to feel comforted, like a warm security blanket. Yeah, okay. So now I have a few books here. You can't see the piles, but I have a few books here that are from a range of genres, but mainly fantasy, literary / romance, and like general fic, and then classics. So I don't think I have any short stories actually that I want to, because most of my short stories are not the cozy, they are the creepy. But that's the range of genres that we're talking about. So the fantasy books, for instance, that I'm going to be recommending to you are not technically like categorized as cozy fantasy. I think the only one that is technically known for being cozy are 2, maybe 3, we shall see. But that's what I'm gonna do for you. I don't think I've ever done a recommendations video, so welcome. Let's just get started because there's a shitload. So I'm not going to be giving a lot of synopses about these books. I'm maybe just going to talk about really briefly. Let's see if I can do that. Really briefly, if you can hear noises, it's my mum. She's in her bathroom. Really briefly on why I decided to recommend these books to you. Like, why is it cozy to me? Does that make sense? We're gonna get started. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Put your cozy recommendations down below for me, please. I've most likely missed out on a lot. Let's get started. Okay, I'm gonna start with the classics first. I've tried to keep these like kind of beginner friendly. I could have very easily recommended like Leo Tolstoy, because Anna Karenina for me is the epitome of cozy. I love that book so much. I could have recommended Bronte. I could have even recommended Dickens, right? But I'm not going to do that because I don't think necessarily they're beginner friendly. So I'm trying to keep things like not super intimidating, but maybe they are. Anyway, let's start with the only poetry that I have on my list. And I only really recommend this because this poet is Rumi, and I have the Essential Rumi. This is translated by Coleman Barks. I read Rumi for the first time in my undergraduate degree for a mysticism course. I connected so heavily with Rumi, and to this day, whenever I read him, like I haven't read much of this because every time I do, I sob. I cry. I shed tears. I can't explain to you how Rumi makes me feel, but it's very much that type of reverence slash feeling comforted by this man who is exploring love and his relationship with God, with his God, and it's just so beautiful. It is so beautiful, and I think that's why for me Rumi is very cozy, because he feels like a security blanket. He feels like someone like I just want to take with me and never let it go. That's the way that Rumi makes me feel. I did an entire research essay on Rumi's poetry. I think I picked a couple, but I really just I just love him. I love his poetry. It's incredible. That's the only poetry collection that I have to recommend as a cozy one. But I do think also, I haven't read her yet, but I feel like Mary Oliver, who I have right here, I feel like Mary Oliver would be a great poet to recommend for wanting to be cozy, but I haven't read her as of yet, so I can't in good conscience recommend her yet. And then let's just go to the classics. So we have Rainer Maria Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet. Now, I've been in the headspace of wanting to reread this. I feel like this is the book that you turn to when you feel like you need a bit of guidance in your life, but also it's like sitting down and having a conversation with a really close friend. Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet. Sorry, that's a really bad joke, but it's actually to France? Is it France? I'm pretty sure it's France. Yep, Franz Xaver Capus engaged in a correspondence with Rainer Maria Rilke, asking for advice on writing, but also just on life. Rilke, again, is one of those authors that I can't get enough of. I'm actually slowly working my way through his sonnets to Orpheus and the Duino Elegies. You can see, very slowly making my way. I just recommend this. It's very short. I love what he has to say about life, philosophy, about learning and knowledge, but also just about love. And like, listen to this. Love between one person and another. That is perhaps the hardest thing it is laid on us to do. The utmost, the ultimate trial and test, the work for which all other work is just preparation. Love at first has nothing to do with unfolding, abandon, and uniting with another person. For what would be the sense in a union of what is unrefined and unfinished till second order? For the individual, it is a grand opportunity to mature, to become something in himself, to become a world in himself for another's sake. It is a great immoderate demand made upon the self, something that singles him out and summons him to vast designs. Like, he just has such this beautiful way of words that I can't articulate. You just have to read it. It is a book that I turn to when I need him the most, and that's why he, for me, and this little book encapsulates cozy. I just love Luca. And then we have kind of a classic murder mystery, Agatha Christie. Now, most of her books, I have to say, are misses for me, but I really loved the ABC Murders. I'm recommending this because it was just a good time. For me, Agatha Christie kind of encapsulates cozy murder mysteries. It's just a good time. You open her up, you sit and you read. Sometimes you try and figure out who's doing what, and the twists are great. But I'm not like, be careful, because some of her books have rampant racism. So I think ABC Murders are one of the lesser in-your-face fuckery, but I just loved the actual plot, like the actual murders and how they were orchestrated. Like, I just really love this. Really easy. Plonk on the audiobook. The audiobooks are always fantastic. This is, I think, a really perfect August book if you're in Australia. I feel like Agatha Christie does lend itself more so to the winter seasons. I just find that I feel more in need of Agatha Christie in the winter. But honestly, if you just want an easy but interesting and engaging time, read the ABC Murders. I preferred this over the Orient Express. I preferred this over the Peril at End House, the Nile one, Death on the Nile. I prefer the ABC Murders. The next one, how am I going to justify this? I feel like if you've read Dracula, you'll understand. Dracula by Bram Stoker for me is cozy. I did a whole reading vlog about Dracula and about a few others. Dracula is gothic coziness. Fight me. It is. It's creepy because Dracula, and things are happening that kind of gets your, like, the hairs on your body like to stand on end. But it is just so wonderful to read. And even though I guess you could argue it is high stakes, it doesn't feel like it. It feels very easy to get in this world, to feel for these characters, to the atmosphere and the way that the world itself is described. It's so luscious and rich that you just want to sit down and read. And you want to read this, you know, by the lamplight or in the garden with a really fantastic iced beverage. It's just those books. Like I read this earlier this year and I loved it. I loved my experience reading it. I found it to be so wonderfully comforting. And I think I said that I felt quite nostalgic whilst reading this, even though I've never read this before in my life. But it's because it brings me that feeling of just hand on my heart, like comfort. And I think that's a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is, for some reasons or others, these books do provide comfort for me, and comfort and coziness are quite thoroughly intertwined. But this was such a great book. And if you haven't read it yet, do yourself a favor and do it. I don't know why it took me so long to read it, but it's so good. It's so good. Now the next book is one that I read, I think I read this earlier this month. I think I finished it earlier this month. And the reason why it's on this list is because, again, as I was reading it, I had such an enjoyment. And I think also the descriptions of the countryside was so beautiful that it just felt cozy, right? A lot of this book happens during like the spring, where everything is growing, and there's just so many beautiful descriptions of the world itself. And that is Howard's End by E.M. Forster. Now this is my third E.M. Forster book, pretty chunky to be honest. This is Forster's fourth novel, and it is mainly about two sisters, and it's about classism and like this idea of who inherits England kind of thing. So read it for all that exploration, because E.M. Forster is exceptional, but this just gave me that feeling of, this is why I love reading. I was reading this very slowly, and because I was underlining and just like writing thoughts and things, and I kept on being so blindsided by how absolutely stunning Forster's writing was. The way in which he articulated his ideas, like I don't want to sound too like ridiculous, but these are some really like heavy ideas in here that are being discussed between the characters, and I just found it to be so gorgeously written. Like essentially, like for me this is cozy because of the writing. The writing is just so exceptional that I couldn't understand why I hadn't read it before, and I was sitting in my bed and I was underlining in my pink pen, and I was like, are you joking? Like, are you joking? This is why I love reading, and this is why I love classics. Like, yes, it is a commitment to read classics. It requires a different part of my brain because I feel like I need to engage more in it. But I love that. I love that quality of it. And I just, reading this was so freaking cool, okay? It was cool. And I mostly read this outside. Like, I mostly read this in my garden, my dog by my side on his little bed, sometimes in the sun, sometimes in the shade, surrounded by the plants that my mum loves to plant. It was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. I feel like it just, it's a perfect cozy book. It's a great cozy classic if you want. Don't be scared for the thickness, because my edition is, I think, bigger than normal. The writing is ginormous though, so like don't be scared. But yes, E.M. Forster's Howard's End. I want to read, I think, A Room with a View next, maybe? We shall see. But that has ended the classics recommendations. Let's go now to like the lit, romance, general fic section. I think this wouldn't be a cozy recommendations video without Allie Smith. So I'm going to recommend the seasonal quartets of Allie Smith's work. I love this series. The rest are up here. Like this just ugh. And I have companion piece there, but it's not the same size. But this quartet fundamentally changed me as a reader, I think. Allie Smith's writing is so different to what I was used to, and I'm trying to remember if I read this pre-Sally Rooney or post-Sally Rooney. I think it was pre, because one of the main reasons why one of the criticisms that I kept on hearing heavily about Sally Rooney is that she doesn't use quotation marks, and I remember thinking, but Allie Smith's seasonal quartet does not use quotation marks, and that was not an issue at all. I actually loved it as like a little quirk, right? This introduced me to literary, like more literary fiction that I felt maybe a bit intimidated by in the beginning. But Allie Smith's seasonal quartet, I won't go into much detail, as I hopefully not, but I've been rambling for nearly 30 minutes. This book specifically was amazing. Allie Smith somehow can weave together so seamlessly really big brain thoughts and ideas, as well as this really gently building character study. I don't know how she does it, and it feels so authentic to like the human experience and the human condition, and that's why I love the seasonal quartet so much. I personally read these in each season. So I started, I'm pretty sure autumn is the first one. I read this in autumn, and then I read the rest in their seasons. I just thought that would be fun, and it was fun, but I don't necessarily think like you have to do it that way. But it's like a fun way of reading through the quartet if you want to do it. But this is just wonderful. For me, the way that this is cozy is paradoxically is that the ideas spoken about in here and in the quartet are ideas that I think, even like as a human, as a woman, with what is currently and has been previously happening in the world, a lot of it you think about and you're trying to wrap your head around things, and I couldn't really articulate what I was feeling, and Allie Smith like represented those feelings, and it brought not only, I think it brought in a way comfort to see these characters going through these motions that felt very similar to kind of what I was trying to, you know, orient myself with, but also just the idea that you'll be okay, you know. And at the time when I read this, that was really comforting. But the paradoxical element to it is that it confronted you with things that maybe you didn't think of, or you were trying to not think of because you didn't want to, you know, cause another existential crisis. But it was just a really wonderful reading experience, and I love Allie Smith. I love what she does. I cried. This book made me just non-stop cry. It was amazing. It was amazing. So that's why I recommend autumn, but like the seasonal quartet overall. I'm wanting to read more of Allie Smith, hopefully sometime soon. Actually, let me just pick up the books that I'm going to be talking about, because then that'll be easier. We'll keep it with like the literary for the moment. And because I just talked about her, I'm going to recommend Beautiful World, Where Are You? This is my favourite Sally Rooney book. I have read every Sally Rooney book except for her short stories. What is there to say about this? What is there to say about Beautiful World, Where Are You? This is one of my favourite books of all time. I remember reading this going, oh my god, she sees into my brain. Like, that's why it's cozy to me. That's why I would recommend this as a cozy book, because it makes you feel seen. It articulates things that you are struggling with as a woman in my late 20s. I am 29. Next year I can't say late 20s anymore. It brought both peace, because I was like, oh, so like I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who thinks like this. It brought peace, but also just like, okay, I'm gonna be okay. Again, that comfort, that warmth of feeling that comes with being comforted. This also just screams to me spring. I think it's just everything that's happening on the cover. I love this book so much. I love Sally Rooney overall. If any of you want me to do like a deep dive into Sally Rooney's books, let me know. I've given all of her books 5 stars, but I have a very clear ranking of her books in my head. Beautiful World, Where Are You is obviously first, and then it's Conversations with Friends. I know. And then Normal People. Although I loved Normal People, gave it 5 stars, I don't necessarily think it's her best. I don't know. I think that's a controversial take. But this was phenomenal. This was absolutely phenomenal. And it brought so much joy, but also made me uncomfortable, paradoxically, because of how it articulated what I've been feeling and thinking about for a while. It's like, oh, Sally Rooney, excuse me, like, are you listening to my thoughts? But then you read all the reviews and you talk to people who've read this book and they're like, no, I felt the same way. And it just brings joy. It brings joy. I love Sally Rooney. And I love Beautiful World, Where Are You? I don't know, but like, also remember, these are all subjective, right? So you most likely, like, if you've read this and hated it, I understand. Right? But for me, when I've read these books, they've just created this feeling, and that's why I'm recommending them as cozy books to read if you feel like wanting to be cozy. Because remember, friends, cozy is a mindset. Yes, wonderful. The last literary book, I had to. After Sappho by Selby Wynne-Schwartz. What a joy. Truly, what a joy this book was. I think this, why I consider this book a cozy read, it ties into the idea of being, I don't know if comforted is the right word in this instance. It's more like a feeling of, is it peace, or is it a sense of, maybe it's a sense of representation? I don't know if I can articulate it properly, but it's like this sense of, we're all here, you know, like we're here, and I feel like, you know, these women of history's past, we're holding hands with them to like march into the future, like that kind of feeling. So for me, this was such a surprise when I read it for the first time. It was for I think it was the Booker shortlist, was it last year? And I remember reading this going, how was this written, you know? And it came into my life at like the perfect point. I couldn't stop talking about it. I kept on talking about it with my supervisor. I really hope she read it. It's just so gorgeous. It's also written in like fragments, talking about various queer women throughout history, and it's just, yes, I keep birthday cards, Christmas cards in my books, because why not? And it is just stunning. It's just stunning, but also very emotional. I cried a lot in this book because of what these women went through, but it brought again this sense of solidarity. Oh my god, I found the word. So if you haven't read After Sappho, I really do recommend picking it up, and I also recommend reading the review in the New York Review of Books in their last issue, not the most recent issue, which I think is like the 60th anniversary issue. The last issue, they had an incredible review. I if I can find a link to it, I will. I don't know if I'll be able to, but if I do, I'll link it. It's such a stunning review, so I highly recommend picking this up. Now with the next 3 books, well, mainly next 2 books, we'll say, they're romance. One's in a series and one's a standalone. These is just because cozy queer romance, like, that's a thing. It is a thing, and I love these books always because they bring me such joy, and reading them is like sitting down having a tea with my bestie, you know, like just that feeling of not having to like perform and being able to be authentically yourself in a safe space. That's kind of what these feel like. And so the first one, I was just going to say, it's Delilah Green Doesn't Care, and like this series by Ashley Herring Blake. I love Delilah Green Doesn't Care. Loved it, couldn't put it down. Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail, had a couple issues with it, but I still loved it. This is just perfect sapphic romances. They're perfect sapphic adult romances that just fill my soul with such joy and pure sunshine. Like I just love this. I just love it so much. Okay, I just love it so much. So haven't read those, read them, they're fabulous. And this one means so much to me. But I feel like from my experience, it felt like one of the first queer books that hit mainstream hype, like mainstream popularity when it came out. That wasn't Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. It's Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I've loved every single Casey McQuiston book. So I could recommend, honestly, all of them, but I'm gonna stick with Red, White and Royal Blue. Like everything that I just said about Delilah Green, I say about Red, White and Royal Blue. This book means so much to me. It is just so fantastic, and I feel like it is one of those books where I'm like, oh, we also deserve happiness. You know what I mean? It's just wonderful. I haven't reread this since I first read it. I think, I don't know, I keep on not putting it off, but kind of, because I just like, I know it's gonna make me emotional. I watched the movie though, and the movie made me cry, like purely. Seeing it as a movie just like killed me. I'm like, oh my god, look at us. But yeah, this is beautiful. It's a romance between two men. One is it's like in an alternate reality where the president of the United States is a woman and her son is like the first son. Him and the Prince of England fall in love, and it's just really stunning and it's really wonderful. Highly recommend. Okay, we're 37 minutes in, friends. Let's go to standalones. Okay, this is now fantasy, and I'm going to go through these really quickly. So this is one of the books that I think is marketed as cozy fantasy, and that's The Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. Low stakes, a gorgeous narrator, a gorgeous romance, a found family. What else is there that you want in a fantasy? This is coziness. It's about a witch falling in love, and it's about magic. So much fun. I cannot wait to see what Sangu Mandana writes next. I really hope she like continues writing this type of fantasy. It's just so gorgeous. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend you do. Please do. And then this might be weird, I put Warbreaker down by Brandon Sanderson. I think this is cozy. Yes, there's action, but the action is not super intense. Yes, it was slightly confusing at times because of the magic system, but I didn't feel like it was hurting my brain that much. It just felt really fun and easy to pick this up. I would sit down and read it and time would fly, and I loved the peace it brought me whilst reading it. I think it calmed my mind down very well, and I was able to fully immerse myself into this world. And I love it. I won't stop talking about this book because it was just so good, and I can't wait to read more Brandon Sanderson. But I think also great place to start for Brandon Sanderson, in my humble opinion, and not only because I also started with this one. And the next one is no surprise. I feel like it's Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. Okay, I know a lot of people might be screaming at me right now because is this cozy? In a sense, it is cozy because it brings forth such strong emotions of solidarity, of the universality of womanhood specifically in this, because it is tackling issues of womanhood, of being positioned as a woman in society, even though this is a mythological retelling of Ariadne, but it is so much more than that. And I think that's what makes it, in my mind, cozy. I read this and I was like, fuck yes. Fuck yes. Yes. Like, this is exactly what I want out of a feminist mythology retelling. Like, this is what I want. Jennifer Saint's writing is exceptional. Just everything about this is exceptional. I honestly would recommend, if you want to start reading Jennifer Saint, or even if you want to start reading mythology retellings, I wouldn't start with Madeline Miller. I would start with Jennifer Saint. Or, where is her book? Or Clytemnestra by Costanza Casati. I could also recommend you start there if you want to go into myth retellings. But this is not a cozy, I don't think this is necessarily a cozy recommendation, but I wouldn't start with Madeline Miller. I find Jennifer Saint to be much more accessible, and also it's just that sense of we're fighting all together, but in a cozy way. But yeah, no, I think that is why I think this is a bit cozy, because it makes me feel powerful, and I love that. But also it is, I would check trigger warnings for this because it's intense. Again, I cried with every book. And then the next books that I'm going to talk about are books that, yeah, they're part of series. So it's like a blanket recommendations for this book, but also for the series that they're part of. The first one is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. The Hobbit is still my favourite. I don't necessarily love the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I'm considering this part of the series because it's you read The Hobbit first. I love this. I think I've talked about this before, in the sense that reading this again, similar to Dracula, it felt nostalgic. I have never read The Hobbit prior to when I read this for the first time a couple years ago, but I also read it as an audiobook. It was such a visceral reading experience because it felt like there was this, like a grandfather sitting down in front of the fire, opening up the book and just like reading to me. And it was so gosh darn amazing. This is just, for me, screams cozy. When I think of cozy books, I think of this. I think of The Hobbit. Something about Bilbo Baggins is just, I love Bilbo. Bilbo is my favourite character in this entire like universe. So The Hobbit. The Hobbit. The next one is no surprise. This is marketed as a cozy fantasy. It's Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. Everyone has been screaming about this book. Low stakes, found family. On the periphery, there's like a little romance. It's gorgeous. It is gorgeous. And if you just want to relax, if you want the relaxation element of cozy, read Legends and Lattes. Read Legends and Lattes. There you go. That's my recommendation. The next one is Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. Again, blanket recommendation for this series. This is a very slow building story about a young woman or young girl. It incorporates elements of Russian folklore. There's also a romance that's also very don't read this if you just want the romance. Like, this is the most slowest of slow burns, so there you go. But everything about this is just lush. That's how I would describe it. This is lush. It is rich in everything that it does, in character development, in describing the world itself, in the landscape, in the environment. It is a book that is so, I feel like it's so steeped in seasons. Does that make sense? Like, each season, there's so much time taken to describe the season, to describe what's happening in the land where, is it Vasya? Yeah, Vasya, where Vasya lives. It's just a wonderful, wonderful story. It is a historical fiction though, so do that with what you will. Very, 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 very slow burn. But this is the kind of like literary fantasy, and it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. What else do I want to say about this? It's Blurred by Robin Hobb. Do I need to say more? Oh, I don't see enough people talking about this series on the internet. This is A Winter's Promise by Christelle Debow. Debow? I say Debow. DeBoss. It is part of the Mirror Visitor Quartet, as you can see. Right? This series is exceptional. It does end in a way that I am still angry about, but I understand it. But I'm still angry about it. But this is absolutely stunning. It is technically a YA fantasy series, but this is not YA. This is so much, I would consider this adult. Definitely adult fantasy. It is about a woman who basically, it's an arranged marriage situation with a young man who is from a different part of the world. And so this is slightly, is it just like post-apocalyptic? It's where God got so angry with the world that he broke Earth apart. And so each like country or like area is literally like floating pieces of Earth's crust, right? So the world building is so intense. It is such a wonderfully constructed world. It is so complex, so layered. It is very political, and it's a lot about court theatrics and performance and what goes behind the scenes. The main character, Ophelia, is literally wonderful. She is so wonderful. I feel like she subverts the tropes of like a Mary Sue type of situation. Like in the beginning you're like, oh, she's not like other girls, but she's just so perfectly written. I love the series so much. I have read the first 3 books possibly 3 times, maybe 4 times, most likely 3 times. I just loved it. I loved it. I think I read it twice in the same year. It's such a great series. You need to read it. You need to read it. But again, it's very slow burn. It's so slow burn. And there is the whole thing of like the ending not being very satisfactory. I'm still hoping that the author wants to come back to it and like write another book just to make me happy. Christelle Debow, if you're watching this, can you please write a fully happy ending and not just ambiguous, please. The next book is also book 1 of a series, but also just the series as a whole. It's Wolfsong by TJ Klune, part of the Green Creek series. I've got the original ones, but I think the newer one, they're republishing them slowly. This is what the new edition of Wolfsong looks like. This is about gay werewolves. Like, let's see if I can put this book in. Yep. No, I didn't put it in properly. These are about gay werewolves. Do I need to talk about anything more? It's amazing. The writing is very, very lyrical. It's kind of written in this way. I'm gonna pause and have a look. So that might be a bit of a turn off for everyone, but this is about 2 boys who essentially grow up together and fall in love. And they're also werewolves. And it's wonderful. And I think this is just such a great series. Love, family, found family, identity, and sticking it to the man. And I love it. It is one of those books one of those series where you just, when you're feeling down, you whack it open and you read. And you feel so incredibly happy. But also sad because things happen and it makes you cry, but in a good way because you know it's going to have a happy ending, right? So Wolfsong or the Green Creek series by TJ Klune. I feel like you can also recommend any TJ Klune, but I'm going to mainly focus on the Green Creek series. The next is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss, part of the series that has a very long name. It is like Athena Society. It's got a really long series name, but it's The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, European Travel for the Monstrous Gentlewoman, and The Sinister Mystery of the Mesmerizing Girl. It's 3 books. They're amazing. I highly recommend you read it. It takes place in Victorian London, where like fictional characters are actually just like real figures, like they're part of the story. And it's about these women who were created. So like you have, you know, the like Frankenstein's monster, or Adam, or whatever. I think he's referred to in this book as Adam. The creature that Frankenstein created, the woman that he created for his monster, Justine, her name is in this book. She's part of it. Dr. Moreau, he creates like a shape-shifting woman. She's in here. Like, it's like the women of these stories, and it's great. And they figure out mysteries. Like, it's such a joy to read. It's such a joy to read. There's like an element, like a very small possible romance element between the main character Mary Jekyll, who is the daughter of Dr. Jekyll, between Mary and Sherlock Holmes, and it's the most cutest thing. It is the most cutest thing. So this is a really great series. I would recommend this for everyone. For everyone. Adult, YA, it's a great time. The friendship between these women, the family that they make, gives cozy. It gives cozy. And the next book, I feel like everyone recommends this as like a cozy fantasy. It's A Marvelous Light by Freya Marske. It's a queer historical fantasy romance, and it's absolutely wonderful. Again, happy stories about queer people. Just brings joy, comfort, is ultimately the most coziest things of all time. And this is just really fun. And like there are things that happen kind of like overarching, like there's like, you know, the book plot, and there's like the overarching like series plot that's happening. And I just love I love everything that Freya Marske is doing. The 3rd book and final book of this series comes out in November. I'm very excited, but also very sad. Okay, the second last book that I'm going to recommend is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, which is book 1 in the Wheel of Time. You know my feelings about the Wheel of Time. I am in love with this series. The Eye of the World is one of the books on my read list, on my read shelf, that I wish I could read for the first time. I can't explain to you properly how I felt reading this book. It was awesome in like the purest definition of that word. Absolutely incredible. I started reading this going, oh, I wonder what the hype's all about. And then like, you know, 50 pages in, I was like, oh my God, now I know what the hype is about. Robert Jordan is that bitch. Was that bitch. I keep on saying that. I'm so sad that he's not here anymore. But like literally I have post-its that say, such an incredible chapter, on the edge of my seat. Like, this book is just magic, world building, action, very slow, epic fantasy that I absolutely fucking love. And what I feel for this series, I feel as though I've read it in my childhood, when in reality I read it when I was in my late 20s. But like this series already means so much to me. So for me, this epitomizes cozy because of that relationship that I have with it. If you haven't started this series and you're into epic fantasy, read it. If you want to start with epic fantasy, it's a commitment. If you want to begin with epic fantasy and you go into a 13, 14, 15 book series, I understand. But you won't be disappointed. You won't be disappointed. And for those... Should I have a conversation about it? I don't think this is the place. This is not the time. The reason why it reminds people so heavily of The Hobbit and like The Lord of the Rings is because that was the point. I understand. I'm not trying to be a bitch, but the reason why this feels like Tolkien is because it was meant to feel like Tolkien. That's what was selling. Robert Jordan was like, I'm gonna write a similar situation and then see what happens. And then he saw what happens. He makes the story utterly his own. I think he makes the story utterly his own, like those types of tropes in the first book, to be perfectly honest. But other people don't think so, which is fine. Again, reading is subjective, but if you were wanting to start this series, don't utilize that as like a thing to like stop you. Take the plunge. Also, Rosamund Pike narrates the audiobook for the Eye of the World. And golly gosh, she is absolutely incredible, and it's not because I have a crush on her. Okay? Absolutely incredible. Okay, finally, the last book. The last book, and this is a blanket recommendation for this author, to be honest. Nalini Singh. Nalini bloody Singh. This is Slave to Sensation. I know. Don't judge the title. It's a Slave to Sensation, which is book 1 in the Side Changeling series. This is marketed as a paranormal romance. So much more than that, okay? This series, excuse my dog, Side Changeling, and then the offshoot of that series is the Side Changeling Trinity series. So much more than just a paranormal romance. I feel like paranormal romance is used to not demean, but kind of underestimate the complexities of these types of stories, okay? This is epic fantasy. It just focuses on the romance, okay? It's epic fantasy romance. How do I explain this book? If you've known me since I was a teenager, I go back with Nalini Singh a while, okay? Nalini Singh is a fucking awesome writer. More people need to love her. This is a world. It's like set in the 2100, 2300s, like it's in the future. Society is made up of 3 races. You have humans, you have the Psi, who are essentially enhanced humans who have psychic ability, but Psi require essentially like an internet connection. They require a psychic connection to, it's like a network. So every Psi on the planet are connected via this network. It's like a cloud, if you will, right? But every Psi requires that network because the biofeedback keeps them alive. You have Psi, and then you have changelings, which are essentially shifters. So you have every changeling under the sun. Now, the main characters of the Psi Changeling series are from mainly 2 changeling packs. We have Dark River, which is a leopard pack, and Snow Dancer, who are a wolf pack. They're the main 2 changeling packs that we go. And so every book focuses on one couple, and so the romance is very heavily the center, but Nalini Singh constructs such a vivid and complex world that is so deeply political. There is so much happening on the outside that as you go through the series, it becomes more and more intense. Now, for me, this is cozy because of that nostalgic element, but also it's such an incredible time. You can read this at I read this at any point in my life, and I'm still utterly blown away, and I'm still right there on the edge of my seat, fully knowing how each book ends, but this series is still ongoing, right? So I don't actually know what is going to happen at the end, but it's just such a wonderful, it's just so wonderful. It's so wonderful. And I think this is just the perfect cozy read, because look, they're not huge. They're not huge. They're really easy to get through. The world building and the complexity it's like reinforced enough throughout each book that you don't ever feel confused about what's happening, even though there are so much is happening like constantly. They're so amazing. I love Nalini Singh is one of the best writers out there. Like she writes incredible romance, but she also writes incredible worlds. She creates incredible worlds. There's such a layer of sophistication to them. And yes, I might be biased because I've been reading this since I was a teenager, but it's the truth. And also if you're not into like explicit sex scenes, then don't read these because they are at their heart romance novels. And I think would recommend the Guild Hunter novels as well, but I don't think I would necessarily recommend the Guild Hunter series by Nalini Singh as a cozy recommendation because the stakes are a bit intense, and it's set in a much more violent world than the Psy Changeling series. But if you want to read the Psy Changeling series, it's a very long series and I have been asked before where to start, and unfortunately in order to understand the world of these books you need to start from the beginning. A lot of people claim that you can start with the Psy Changeling Trinity series, which is the offshoot, which begins with Silver Silence, but I would say no. I would say if you want to get the most out of each character, if you want to get the most out of what is happening politically and also militarily in the world, you need to start from the beginning because everything is an accumulation, and in order to understand what happens in book 15 you need to understand what happened in book 3, kind of thing. Like everything connects, and I think you need to start from the beginning, unfortunately. But again, if you don't like heavy romance, then don't read them. But that, my friends, is the end of my cozy recommendations video. Remember, cozy is a mindset. We can all be cozy at whatever time that we want. But I hope this video was enjoyable. I apologize for how lengthy it was, but I wanted to get through a fair few recommendations. I am so deeply grateful for all of you being here with me right now. So thank you so much for that. If you have any recommendations that I didn't talk about, please let me know because I'm always on the lookout for cozy books. Hello, it's me. Other than that, I'm going to draw this video to a close. Thank you so much again for being here with me on this journey, right? Until next week, happy reading, stay safe and take care, my friends.